Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fort Collins Book Fest 5-year celebration. My name is Sochi, and today we're celebrating 5 years of books and brews, writings and riffs, food and thought, big science, and the great outdoors. As always, we are celebrating the importance of literature, writing, books, and our libraries. Check out the virtual program at focobookfest.org. We have book talks, discussions, panels, prose, and poetry readings over these 2 weekends. Make sure you attend as many as you can and share with your friends and family. Before we get to our session, I'd like to thank our sponsors. This festival could not happen without our generous sponsors. They make this book festival completely free and open to the public. The Fort Collins Book Festival is produced by Poudre River Public Library District in partnership with CSU Morgan Library. Our presenting sponsor is City of Fort Collins Fort Fund. Further support has been provided by the Friends of the Poudre Public Library, Friends of Morgan Library, Willoughby Morgan Endowment Fund, Downtown Development Authority, Lidget Johnson and Goodman PC, Front Range Community College, Downtown Fort Collins Creative District, Old Firehouse Books, and our media partners, KUNC and 105.5 The Colorado Sound. We'd like to give special thanks to Northern Colorado writers for presenting all 4 of our writers' workshops. Thank you to all of them, and thank you so much for supporting the 5th Annual FOCO Book Festival. Our speaker today is Jim Davidson with Speaking of Adventure. As a climber for 38 years and as a high-altitude expedition leader, Jim is an expert in resilience. Jim has been on successful ascents from Argentina to Tibet, from Bolivia to Nepal. Along the way, he and his teammates have been commended twice by the U.S. National Park Service for volunteering for successful high-altitude rescues. Jim has shared his intense experiences on TV with CNN, CBS, ABC, NBC, PBS, and more. In addition, his survival story was made into an episode of the international TV show, I Shouldn't Be Alive. His amazing survival tale and the lessons he learned from it are shared in his co-authored New York Times best-selling book called The Ledge. The Ledge was selected as one of the best books of the year by Amazon. Jim has 2 grown children. He lives in Colorado with his wife of 30 years, who is a very, very tolerant woman. Please stick around for the live Q&A with Jim after the program, and please help me welcome Jim Davidson.
So, you had big plans for 2020. You might have had family plans and vacation plans, maybe even a written business plan. It was probably going to be a big and fulfilling year. And then something happened, something big, COVID-19. And with that, everything changed. Our social lives and our home lives are different. School and shopping feel weird. Business and the economy are uncertain. And yet you need to live your life. You need to lead too, at work, at home, in the community. So how are we supposed to keep living our lives and lead when there's so much uncertainty? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a book that I co-wrote years ago with my co-author, Kevin Vaughn, called The Ledge. And this year, between political stuff and economic stuff and the pandemic, and in northern Colorado, right around where the festival is happening, also lots of fires, there's lots of uncertainty going on. And in the story we share in The Ledge, I got caught in a difficult situation and had to face a lot of uncertainty. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a pre-recorded keynote that I recently did, and it's going to be about 24 minutes, and we'll watch the video and I'll have some videos inside that, some from the field, some produced. So you'll get a feel for the story behind The Ledge, and then we'll come back live, and Sochi and I will take a few questions. We have a little bit more content to share with you as well. So let's cue that video up and go ahead and start watching the story that actually happened years ago that became the book, The Ledge. Doug, start the video, please. And I want to talk about this climb for a few minutes, Mount Rainier in the state of Washington, 14,411 feet. I went to go climb it in 1992. I've been climbing about 10 years, and I went with a partner that had even more experience than me. So we tackled a difficult route called the Liberty Ridge on the north side of the mountain. Some people go on the south side of the mountain, but we chose a more difficult route on the Liberty Ridge. So just 2 of us, we traveled to the mountain, and we knew that going up on the mountain, we were going to have to deal with glaciers, ice climbing, rock climbing, etc. And my partner for that trip was Mike Price. Now, we met in graduate school. I was studying geology, and he was studying English. We became friends and partners and climbed together for about 6 years. Now, I've been climbing about 10 years, but Mike had been climbing longer than me, about 14 years. And Mike was also an instructor for Colorado Outward Bound. And they take students out into the woods, teach them how to climb and do all that kind of stuff.
And that was really the skills-based things they were teaching them. But really, Mike told me what they're teaching them is how do they respond when things go wrong. Because the group may have a goal to climb the peak, but somebody's sick, and somebody wants to go faster, and someone else wants to go slower. Now we have a little tension in the group. And that's really what they're teaching them on Outward Bound. How do you respond when things go wrong? So Mike was a very skilled climber, and he had all the things you might think of, that he had good knowledge of the climbing gear and first aid and everything. But the thing he had that made him a great climber was he had resilience. And we think about this in several ways. Sometimes we'll talk about resilience like it's bouncing back. And that's a first good start. But resilience can go deeper than that. You can bounce back when something goes wrong, but you can also learn from what went wrong and carry that with you to the next challenge, to the next opportunity. Well, Mike and I went off to Mount Rainier, and we're going to do a climb that's going to take us about 3 or 4 days. So we're going to have to bring food and fuel and tents and stoves and all that stuff. Our packs weighed too much, so we got down to some of the minimal gear we could carry. We also know that those glaciers are out there, and on those glaciers there are lines, big cracks called crevasses. And those crevasses are giant cracks in the ice that might be 50 feet deep or 100 feet deep. You never know. So as a result, Mike and I are going to stay roped to one another the whole time. Sometimes we'll put in ice screws to attach ourselves. Sometimes we'll move simultaneously. But we're going to use our ice axes in another way. I told you that we use it for climbing the steep stuff on the steep ice. But we're also going to use it as a probe. And before we take a step, we'll probe forward and feel the ground. If it feels solid and sounds solid, we'll step onto it. But if we probe forward and find that the snow is hollow underneath, that tells us there's a crevasse under there. And we'll back up a little bit and go around. And also, if one of us slips, he can yell to the other partner, "Falling!" And the second partner can jam their ice axe into the snow, lay down on top of it, and by holding the ice axe into the snow, you can be the anchor for the team. And when your falling partner makes the rope tight, you'll be the anchor and catch your falling partner. So the ice axes are important to us for several things about progress as well as safety. So this climb's going to take us a couple days. I want to scroll out a little line here on the photo of Mount Everest, the black and white, excuse me, of Mount Rainier. We're going to scroll out this line on Mount Rainier, and you'll see the green line kind of wiggle across. That's where we made it to on the first day, camped out at spot number 1 where that little triangle is. Now we left our tents behind intentionally to save weight, so we just rolled our sleeping bags out on the ice, slept under the stars. Next day got up really early and started climbing about 5 o'clock in the morning. And we climbed and climbed and climbed. We made it most of the way up the Liberty Ridge, but we ran out of daylight. It started getting dark around 8:30 or so. We climbed into the night by turning on our headlamps. We kept climbing, and I led another section of rope about 150 feet, and then Mike led another section of 150 feet. And finally, we knew we had to stop. We just can't keep climbing all night. So we found a spot that was sort of flat, and we took out our ice axes, and we realized we needed to make it a little bit flatter, so we used the back of the axe, called the adze, and we chopped with the adze and made the ice a little bit flatter, rolled out our sleeping bags. When we stretched out our nylon sleeping bags on the ground, we laid down and we put our heads down, just putting a boot under your head as a pillow, and we started slowly sliding downhill. And we realized this is not going to work. So we had to get up, turn our headlamps on, and go back to our gear, and take out an ice screw again. And we put our climbing harnesses back on, used one of these ice screws, turned it into the ice, and clipped one ice screw to me and one to Mike, so we're each attached to it. So now when we slowly start sliding downhill, it eventually tugged on our harness, and we realize, we're hanging from an ice screw. It's not a very great way to get some sleep, but we do get a little bit of rest, and that way we can make it through the night. Now, I believe I have a picture here of Mike the next morning. You'll see he's in his sleeping bag, so he's pretty warm, and he's attached from that nylon leash back to an ice screw so that he's safe. He doesn't go all the way down the mountain. And there's a word to describe this process. It's called bivouac, and it's actually a military term, which means soldiers camping in the open. My wife tells me it means idiots sleeping in the snow. She may be right about that one. But anyways, we make it through that night, start climbing on day 3, make some pretty good progress, and climb up over the vertical cliffs near the top, over the false summit at 14,000 feet, not quite the true summit, dropped down to about 600 feet, and slept out above 13,000 feet. Had to stay out or bivouac out a third night, got up on the 4th morning, and did the last 600 or 800 feet to the summit. And when we got there, we were just so glad to finally make the summit, because we've been trying to climb this mountain all by ourselves the last 3.5 days, belaying each other, swinging our ice axes, really quite tired, and we're pretty glad and proud to make the top of this mountain. Now, we hadn't seen any other climbers for the last few days, but we knew that we were going to have a much easier route down. We knew that we were going to go down by a more commonly climbed route called the Emmons Glacier route on the northeast side of the mountain. So we should be able to descend pretty easily. We're going to go down an easier route. We can follow the tracks of other climbers. Our packs are lighter because we've eaten the food and gotten rid of the fuel. So we figure it'll take us about 4 hours down the mountain, another 4 hours through the woods, and we'll be off the mountain by the time the sun goes down. So that was our plan, and we left the summit. And when we left the summit, it was about 9 a.m., and it was June 21st, first day of summer, longest, sunniest day of the year. And I want to show you a little video of what happened when we started descending, because we made it about down to 12,000 feet, maybe a little bit lower. We only had another hour to get back onto the edge of the glacier and finally on solid rock. And that's when our trip changed. Things went wrong. Things went very wrong. So let's see a short summary video from the TV show I Shouldn't Be Alive, and you'll see what happened to Mike and I as we were descending that day off Mount Rainier.
It's every mountaineer's worst nightmare. Falling into a hidden crevasse. 80 feet down, where no one can hear your cries.
Mike!
Jim is alone, trapped 80 feet down a colossal crevasse. And without his climbing partner, his chances of escape have gone.
If you were listening carefully, you heard the announcer say, without his climbing partner. But I was climbing with Mike. That's true. You see, what happened is I used my ice axe and I probed ahead of me, and the snow felt and sounded solid. But when I stepped onto it, I found out it wasn't solid. We were standing on a giant snow bridge across a giant hidden crevasse. That snow bridge collapsed and dropped me into the crevasse. And I went down, down, down. My partner Mike did his job. He dug in with his ice axe and he slowed me down. But it was about noontime on June 21st. Longest, sunniest day of the year. And his ice axe cut right through the snow. He couldn't stop himself or me, and he got pulled over the lip of the crevasse and down into the crevasse. And tied together, the two of us went all the way to the bottom. We plummeted in. I tried to grab something on the way down, but I couldn't grab anything. We were just flying past the ice walls, and I heard my glove drag along the wall. And all of a sudden, bam! I slammed out on my back. Snow fell onto me. Snow started covering up my chest and even covered my face. Boom! There was another big impact. It was Mike and his pack falling on me, and then more snow fell in. And if someone had been standing there and happened to look down, they probably would have just seen a snow pile with a little bit of rope sticking out of it, and maybe a little bit of gear. We were buried. I was able to free a hand off after a few minutes and clear the snow off my face and spit some snow out, catch my breath, and I started yelling, "Mike, Mike, where are you?" I knew he had to be nearby, but I couldn't move because I was buried in snow up to my chin. I was flailing around with one arm. Then Mike answered, but he didn't answer back with words. He answered back with a groan. I knew my partner was hurt, and he was hurt bad. And I started yelling to him, I'm coming, Mike, but I got to get out of the snow. As I started clearing snow off my face, Mike's breathing went slower, slower, and then it stopped. And I screamed, "Mike!" I knew he was nearby, but I couldn't reach him. So I kept pushing out the snow. It took me, 5 or 10 minutes to dig out. Finally, I had down to my chest clear, and I could reach a little bit further, and I found Mike under the snow about 2 feet away. I cleared the snow off him and checked for vital signs, and he wasn't breathing, so I started doing CPR on my friend. I was trapped behind him and below him. I couldn't do CPR compressions the right way, but I did the best I could, and I was slowly clearing the snow off, and I kept it up for, I don't know how long, 20 minutes or so. And I kept doing the CPR, but Mike didn't recover. Eventually, I got myself free from the snowbank, and I got above Mike so I could do CPR better, but it had been a half an hour since I heard anything from him. And I knew my friend was gone. I was devastated. I couldn't believe it. My head dropped onto his chest, and I thought, Mike's gone, and I'm going to be gone soon too. But I knew I couldn't just quit. I had to at least figure some way out of there. So I lifted my head up, and I started looking around. And when I looked around, I saw an image like this. Down inside a crevasse, the light gets filtered when it goes through the ice. And it filters out all the yellows and greens, and the last light that comes down there is blue. So the deeper you go, the bluer it gets. I'd never seen a crevasse this blue before. Down inside there, when we looked up, I could see a little light directly above my head. That's the snow bridge that had collapsed and formed a hole where Mike and I fell through. So we're down deep inside the crevasse, and I started looking up, and I guessed that we were in 40 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet. And I said, "Oh man, Mike, we are in big trouble because there's no way I can climb that. No way. I mean, I'm a good climber. I'll try something, but nobody can climb 60 feet of vertical or overhanging ice with nobody to belay them." I thought, that's it. Mike's gone and I'll be gone soon too. I felt like giving up. I was scared out of my mind. But I knew that Mike had given his life to save mine. I couldn't just quit just because it was hard or scary. So I went to the edge of the snow pile we were on. Mike was laying next to me, and I looked off the edge of the snow pile expecting to see the floor of the crevasse. I thought maybe I can walk out the end. But when I looked down, all I saw was darkness and space. And I realized we're not on the bottom of the crevasse. We'd actually landed on a small snow bridge. And when I looked over the edge of that, I looked down, I could see the crevasse stretch for another 30 or 40 feet deeper down. I couldn't even see the bottom. I panicked. I thought, I can't believe this. We're on this snow ledge, and if this snow ledge collapses, we're going deeper into the crevasse. Well, that's when I knew I had to go to the gear, so I went over and I grabbed some of our ice screws and one of my ice axes, and I slowly started turning the ice screw in. My hands were shaking. I had hardly operate the gear, but I eventually got the ice screw in, found Mike's end of the rope and tied a knot and clipped into our anchor sling, found my end and tied another knot and clipped in, and now at least if we have the snow bridge collapse beneath us, we'll get caught on the one ice screw. At least we won't go in any deeper. And I thought about, how am I going to get out of here? I yelled for a while. I thought someone would see us, or maybe somebody heard us or something, but the other climbers, they were all about a quarter mile away or further. Nobody saw us fall in. Nobody knows we're in here. And I realized, if we're going to get out of here, I'm going to have to climb up those walls by myself. I thought, no, come on. I'm a good climber, but I can't climb these overhanging walls without a partner to help me. There's no way. But I realized I had to at least try. So I started gathering the gear and I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, maybe I can climb where the two walls are close together. It was only about 2 feet apart at the bottom. So maybe I can climb between the two walls using both sides and kind of shinny and chimney my way up for a little bit. And then I'll start climbing one wall or the other. The right-hand wall looked less steep, but that goes back up to a dangerous snow section that's sticking out over the crevasse. I knew I had to climb the steeper wall because it led back to the hole that we fell through. The more safe route, if you will, if I can make it that far. Well, I didn't want to start climbing this wall. I had no idea how I'd get past the overhangs, but this was the safest way out, the most likely to work. So I started gathering the gear, and it took me a while, and I realized maybe I can figure out how to self-belay. That is, I'll use knots to kind of substitute for my partner, and I'll lengthen myself out the length of rope and start working my way up the wall. It took me a while to figure it out. I wasn't sure I had it right, but eventually I had a system that I thought could work, and so I realized it was time to go. And I knew Mike was gone, but I talked to him for a few minutes, and I said, I want to take you with me. Partners are supposed to always stick together, but I can't take you with me and climb this nearly impossible wall. I've got to get out of here today before the sun goes down. Get some help. I promise you, Mike, I'll come back with the Rangers and get you. So I kind of secured Mike on that bottom ledge, and I jumped on the wall and started swinging my ice axes, and I climbed like a man possessed. I climbed like a maniac up that wall. And I climbed so fast that I got up the first 20 feet in about 1 minute. And it was steep for sure, but I was making pretty good progress because I could climb off the back wall and swing my axes on the other wall. And I made pretty good progress. And I got up about 20 feet, and then the wall started getting close to vertical. And then it went to dead vertical. And then it started going into overhanging mode. And when it starts getting overhanging, that's when all the weight goes onto your arms instead of your strong legs. And then I fell. I knew it was going to happen. So when I fell off the wall, it was not a big surprise. I fell off the wall, smashed into the ice wall, kind of hit my face and left a little bloody face print against the ice. And I realized I was going to have to change modes. I couldn't keep free climbing, swinging my ice axes and kicking my crampons. So now I was going to have to use the gear to aid my way out. Climbers use the equipment to assist them, so they call it aid climbing. And I looked up and I thought, well, if I had about 20 ice screws, I could probably aid climb my way out of here. But I didn't have 20 ice screws. 20 ice screws and the 40 carabiners I would need to make it work looks like a pile of gear about like this. But the problem is, nobody carries this much gear. Instead of 20 ice screws, I had 6. Instead of 40 carabiners, I had about 15. So right off the bat, I'm short on resources. So I'm short on resources, I'm short on time, I'm short on people, and I've got a tough, tough challenge. I didn't want to face it, I didn't want to embrace it, but I knew I had to. So I started using the ice screws that I had left to start climbing the wall. But I'd already used up 2. One for my bottom anchor, one for the ice screw I'm hanging from. I only had 4 left. Well, I knew I was going to have to start aid climbing with those 4 ice screws left, and we'll see how far we can get. We'll see how much progress I can make. So I started climbing. And I kept climbing. I made some good progress, and by aid climbing, I made it up, and I used one ice screw after the other, and I got up about another 15 feet Then I was completely out of ice screws, not even quite halfway out. And I realized I can't go any further without any ice screws. It's getting even steeper. And that's when I realized I was going to have to go back down the bottom, take out the bottom ice screws, and go back up and climb it again. So if I want to make any progress, I'm going to have to go up and down and up again, over and over. It'll be slower, scarier, more dangerous, but that's what's required. That's what I had to do to try and make some progress. So I changed into aid climbing mode and started struggling my way up that wall. And I slowly ground my way up that wall over the course of 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and after about 3 or 3.5 hours, I'd made it about 3/4 the way out. But I was tired. Oh, so tired. I really could hardly even lift my arms over my head anymore. So I took a little rest, and I meant to just take a 2-minute rest. And I looked at my watch and rested for a bit. And then I looked at my watch again, and a half an hour had gone by. And that really scared me because I realized I was kind of spacing out. I was tired, exhausted, overwhelmed at the loss of my friend. And I realized I couldn't hang here very long. I had to get back into the game and get moving again. But now I was at the overhang. And I found out that the overhang was so big I couldn't reach past it very well. I could look down in the crevasse, and way at the bottom, 60 feet below me at the end of the rope, I could just make out Mike. And when I saw him, I would want to make sure he was still anchored right. So I'd grab the rope and I'd pull on it and stretch it. And that stretch would tell me that the rope is still attached to Mike, Mike's still attached to the anchor, we're still connected. I'm climbing out not just for myself, but for him too, so I can get out and tell his parents what happened. And so I realized I had to turn around and start dealing with that overhang. Now at first I could barely reach past it with my ice axe. Then I kind of changed my position and changed my rigging, and I got up a little bit higher so I could reach past it. Couldn't see what I was doing, but I could blindly reach past it and turn an ice screw in. I turned that ice screw in. I had to switch arms because I was so tired, back and forth, this arm, that arm, many times. Eventually got it in enough that I could clip into it, hoped that it would hold, and I intentionally swung away from the cliff. And I swung back and forth like a pendulum. And when I stopped, I shinnied up the rope and clipped in with a second carabiner to that ice screw, and I'd made it past the overhang. Now, I didn't have that plan when I'd left the ledge many hours before. I didn't know if I could even make it past this. And I think maybe if I just stayed down the bottom and looked up at the challenge and kept thinking about it and talking about it, I would have never been able to figure out a way to get past it. By getting up the wall and wrestling with that problem, that's what gave me the experience and the judgment I needed in that moment of crisis to solve that problem and keep going higher up the ice face. Well, I made it past that overhang, but I sure was tired. I'm surprised I could even keep on climbing, but I got lucky because the wall got softer because warm air had been drooling in for the last 4 hours. The angle eased back to 80 degrees, back to 70 degrees. So I was able to go back to free climbing, back to the techniques I'd used hours before, and start swinging my ice axes and kicking my crampons in again. So over the course of a short period of time, I climbed up that lower angle, softer wall, and I got up to the lip of the crevasse. I barely had enough strength to pull my head above the surface. When I looked around, I was hoping I'd see other climbers and maybe someone would come and help pull me out the last few feet, but there was nobody there. It was about 5 or 5:30 on a Sunday of Father's Day, June 21st. I was the last guy on the glacier. So I had to fight my way out. I made it onto the surface. I anchored the rope in using one of my ice axes and the last piece of metal called a picket, kind of a piece of metal I pushed into the snow. I anchored the rope so we'd get back down and get Mike out later. With that, I just kind of collapsed in the snow. Now, I was exhausted. I was in the middle of the glacier. I was not safe yet, but I was out of the crevasse. It took me a while to kind of gather myself together, and I started eating some snow because I didn't have any food or water at that point, and I ate some snow to kind of get my voice back. And I could see a ranger station about 1,200 feet below us. So I started yelling down to them. Now, they couldn't hear my words, but they heard, "Hey, hey." Eventually, they realized something was wrong, and they put together a team with 2 rangers and 2 experienced volunteers. They climbed up 1,200 feet to where I was waiting by the edge of the crevasse with Mike's rope still anchored next to me. And it took them a while, but they got up to me. We lowered the ranger down using extra gear. He checked on Mike, and we pulled the ranger back up, and he said, "Mike's gone. You've got him anchored well, but we can't get him out of there today. We need more men and equipment to try to pull him out of the crevasse." So I had to march down to the ranger station, spend the night there. Next day, the rangers came in with more men and equipment on helicopters. Took them all day to get Mike out of the crevasse because the crevasse started collapsing in on itself. They're very living, moving things, crevasses and glaciers. But they managed to get Mike out and flew his body off the mountain back to his parents. So Mike got off the mountain. Later on, another helicopter, I got off the mountain. I'd made it out, but I was a beaten man. I took a picture of myself on the mountain to remind myself what I looked like that day. I'd survived, but I had lost my best friend. I was racked with guilt, beat up, and I didn't know if I ever wanted to go to the mountains again. I thought, what am I supposed to do with my life now? I don't know if I can climb again. I don't know what I can do again. I was brought down for a while. I took some time off and healed physically and healed spiritually a little bit, and eventually started doing easy hiking, and some time passed, and I thought maybe I should share what I learned with other climbers so they can climb out of a crevasse if they ever get caught inside one. But I realized that's really not going to help too many other climbers because it's such an unusual circumstance. I started thinking about it more, and I thought maybe it's not so much about climbing out of glacial crevasses, maybe it's about climbing out of other crevasses in life, things that go wrong, things like divorce and disease and financial mishaps, pandemics. Those are the things that happen. Those are the challenges we're all going to have to face. So I started thinking about it, and I realized, what did I do to get out of that crevasse that might help other people climb out of their crevasses? And I realized it's probably not so much about a set of climbing techniques or specific skills. It's really about having a resilient mindset. And at the leadership team offsite meeting the other day, we were talking about mindset quite a bit, having a positive mindset even when things look a little doubtful, trying to set a mindset that we will make progress even though it's difficult. And for me up on the mountain that day, and I think for other challenges in life, it's about having a resilient mindset. So let's take a quick look and see what a resilient mindset is. When changes happen, you're going to have to accept them. You can't make them go away, so you're going to have to accept it, and then you're going to look at it and go, wow, there's a lot of challenges with this new situation. The old stuff I used to do doesn't work anymore. Well, you're going to have to try and embrace those challenges and go, all right, didn't exactly ask for this, but I guess we could start to do it this way, or we could add that layer in. Maybe we can meet with our customers in this new modality rather than what we used to do. By embracing those challenges, it's a chance to improve yourself and start making progress again, even though conditions have changed. And then you get going, and there's all kinds of uncertainty, and it can really nag at you. And you can start doing the what if. What if this happens? And what if we can never do that again? Well, that's when you're going to have to persevere. Trust your skills, trust your team, make sure that you can work together to figure out these problems and solve them one at a time. And then you're going to make it a little bit further, and then there's going to be another setback. And that's your chance to refine yourself and your team once again. Because you know what? There's always going to be more challenges. You're going to have to start back all over again. There'll be a new change. And you're going to have to accept it and go forward. And this process of having a resilient mindset over and over again to solve the problems, that's how we can solve the big problems. I want to leave this story because I have other stories to tell you. If you want to watch the rest of the video that was on I Shouldn't Be Alive, you can find it online in various places. There's many episodes of I Shouldn't Be Alive. This one's called The Killer Crevasse. It originally aired in 2011, and it airs sometimes on the Discovery Channel, sometimes on the Animal Planet, and you can find it all the usual online places. Sometimes when it airs on the Animal Planet, someone will call me up and they'll go, hey Jim, I saw your show on TV. They say it's going to air on Animal Planet. Are there any animals involved in this story? No, there's no animals. There were no giant anacondas down there. And when I came out of the crevasse, I looked up in the sky. I didn't see any sharknadoes swirling over the summit or anything like that. It's just a channel from that Discovery Channel has. If you're interested in more details of the story, I also co-wrote a book that became a New York Times bestseller and won some awards. It's called The Ledge. It's out there wherever you get your books, an audiobook, ebook, and paperback. It's out there, and that'll tell you the full story of what happened on Mount Rainier and afterwards.
We're back with Jim, and we're going to ask a few questions. If you guys want to send any questions, go ahead. I have a couple of questions for you right now, Jim.
Sure.
Why did you feel it was important to share this story?
Well, after surviving such a traumatic event and losing my good friend, it was a heavy, emotional, and traumatic version of weight, really. I was struggling for a long time. I took a little break to heal physically and spiritually a little bit, and that helped. And I got back to work, and my wife and I kind of started a family and everything. But I still felt like, Mike did such an important thing in saving my life. And I kind of wanted to get that story out there to give him credit for it and to let people know that people can save other people like that. And when I was down in that crevasse, and even though it felt completely overwhelming, those kind of problems can be tackled. So to me, it felt like a really big obligation to share the story, what Mike did, what I had to do to get out of there, just to kind of pass on that hopeful inspiration so other people can tackle their challenges.
Yeah, I love the beginning when you write the letter to Mike and you say that you're going to take that second chance and make it, I can't remember word for word, but something positive. And that's so inspirational. I appreciate that because that's really hard after something so difficult. I mean, I think in any kind of crisis, so thank you for that. Are you climbing and mountaineering still? Is it still part of your life? Are you still doing that?
Yes, it is. It wasn't a whole lot for a couple of years there because I was so beat up and uncertain and traumatized by what had happened, then I kind of backed off a little bit. I still did skiing and cross country skiing and hiking and things like that. But I dabbled a little bit in climbing. But around 1997, Rodney Lay, who used to run the outdoor program here at CSU, asked me if I would lead an expedition with him to take the students to Nepal. And it was a place I'd been to before. And that kind of pulled me back into climbing. And I realized it's not just climbing again. I need to be responsible for these students, take care of them to up and down the mountain and cover their safety. So I kind of re-engaged at that point in 1997. And I've been a serious climber ever since. I've had the opportunity to go on expeditions with friends and with the CSU program here in Fort Collins, and even to go off to Everest. So there was a little hiatus there where I was kind of recovering and thinking about what it all meant. And then I dove back in, and I'm still at it today.
That's great. Do your children climb with you?
Yeah, a little bit. They had a climbing wall in their elementary school here in Fort Collins, which is more and more common these days. So I used to volunteer at the climbing wall. So they and all their friends, from kindergarten up to fifth grade would climb. And we did a little bit of family climbing and other outdoor activities as well, backcountry skiing and snowshoeing and things like that. And I'll tell you, when I used to volunteer on the climbing wall, we would have a lot of parents that would volunteer to help belay the kids. So I would train the parents to be belayers, and then dozens of parents would belay the kids. We would belay thousands of kids over the course of a month. It was one of the scariest things I ever did in climbing, was supervising all these kids climbing. But it was great to see the kids flourish. So it's a big part of the process, passing on the skills.
That's amazing. That's great. What draws people to mountain climbing, even knowing the many real and significant dangers that are there?
Good question. Yeah, I think at first there's a little bit of attraction to the wow mountain climb. It's got a wow factor, you wear this crazy gear and you get up early in the morning and you summit these big mountains. So there's definitely a wow factor, especially in the first year or two. But it is very difficult. It's exhausting. You get little injuries. And if you stay in long enough, it becomes dangerous. You start to get minor injuries yourself. Maybe your friend gets seriously hurt. And if you stay in for a decade, people do die in this sport. It is a dangerous thing. So you might ask, well, why would you keep doing this if eventually it can get serious and people can get hurt or killed? The longer you're in it, the deeper the reasons for staying in it. It starts to become a thing where you realize you can start to appreciate nature and get these incredible views. Well, you can still get that from hiking and skiing. So it becomes a little bit deeper. You realize eventually it becomes a way to refine yourself into a better version of you. And some people do that through marathons or music or meditation. Those are all great. Whatever calls to you, you need to put your energies into that, because that sharpens you and turns you into something better, a better version of you. And I think that's really what climbing does for me and my friends. And also we get the beauty of nature, and we're out seeing this incredible, awesome terrain that's out in the world. So you kind of get all that in one package.
That's great advice. I have a question from Laura on Facebook. Jim, your resilience is an inspiration. Unfortunately, you face something we term in the military as survivor's guilt. Yet you've done much with your life since then. Given the current pandemic, wildfires, and other challenges we are facing, what advice do you have for those who have lost a loved one and must go on?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good observation. I mean, when people go through traumatic events, they can be traumatized. And when they survive and their friends or partners don't, they can have that survivor's guilt. I didn't know what it was at first, but after my good friend Mike died, I found out. And it's also part of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And these things are not easy. They go deep and they can last a long time. It's a difficult struggle, and people go up and down, and people have to deal with it in different ways. There's lots of therapies for it, for sure. And it can take a long time. It can take years, maybe a lifetime in some cases. But over time, you can start to kind of contain it, and you start to learn how to manage it. And then actually, you can start to look at it a little bit more seriously and say, that was a bad event, and I miss my friend that's gone. But what can we learn from this? Can we take forward as some form of strength or wisdom or lessons that you take with you and hopefully you share with others? And that was part of what going back to expedition climbing with the CSU program here did for me, was I was able to share those lessons with the students from the good days of climbing and from the bad days as well. And that leads to something very powerful that they call post-traumatic growth. And it's literally growth after trauma. So it's a very powerful thing, but it can take a long time. But you can take the bad thing that happened before and use it as fuel to make yourself a better version of you, and hopefully help others as well.
That's great. I have another question from Gayla on Facebook. You mentioned reading Joe Simpson's book, Touching the Void, in your book. Your entrapment was similar to his, but the outcome and your relationship and your climbing partner was very different. Have you ever met Joe or others and talked to them about your common experience at surviving your ordeals?
Yeah, somebody was reading the book very carefully. Thank you for that. Yes, I mentioned in the book that I read Joe Simpson's incredible book, Touching the Void, many years ago. And that was critical for me surviving the climb out of the crevasse. Because when I was down in the crevasse, I looked up and I thought, I can't climb this. Nobody can climb this. But Joe Simpson had done something similar. His crevasse was different and he had a severe leg injury, broke his leg badly. So I kind of called it, plus or minus the same. If he did it, it's possible for someone to do it. Maybe I can too. So I credit having read Joe's book to saving my life. And that was part of the reason that I wrote The Ledge. I thought maybe if I can pass this lesson on, I can pay back that obligation, that karmic debt to hopefully inspire and help somebody else. So years did pass. I barely missed meeting Joe twice in my life, just literally missed him in Nepal by a day. I missed him in Perth, Australia by a day. And eventually I caught up with him in Boulder and I got to thank him face to face. We wrote some letters back and forth. And I said, hey, without your book to inspire me, I don't think I would have the courage to try. And he, passed some compliments on, but it's true. Without his book, I don't think I would have had the courage to try. So yeah, I have met Joe. He's quite a guy. He's a character. And I recommend his book, Touching the Void, and other books. But that was part of the obligation I felt to write this book, is to pass those lessons on. Hopefully, it can help someone.
Yes. I have another question from Rodney. How did you meet your co-author, Kevin Vaughn, and why did you trust him with your deeply personal story?
Yes, that's Rodney Lay, my climbing partner here in town. So thanks for the question, Rod. Yeah, that's part of the backstory, and maybe actually Social will use that as a cue to go to slide sharing here, because I want to tell a little bit of the backstory, how the ledge came to be, and that's kind of Rodney's question. So let me try and go to slide share, and we'll hope this works. And then we'll go to here. And then how are we doing there so far, Sochi? Let's see.
It looks good. I can see it.
For some reason, it was a little iffy earlier, so I'm not sure it's going to engage. It's not engaging, I don't think. Can you see that's one slide right now?
I can see the slide and all the other slides on the left.
Yeah, I'm starting with presentation, but it's not engaging for some odd, strange reason. Well, I don't think that's going to work for us. So let me try one more thing. Sorry for the delay here. I don't think it's going to go. So let's stop the screen share, and I will just tell you a little bit how that went. So the question Rodney asked, how did I get to meet my co-author, Kevin Vaughn? I was actually speaking here in Fort Collins at Northern Colorado Writers Conference, one of our co-hosts this weekend that sponsored all the writing workshops. So I was speaking there, and Kevin was in the audience, and I started sharing the story about what happened on Mike and I on Mount Rainier. And Kevin was kind of stunned by it, and he said, wow, that was an amazing story. Can I share your story in the newspaper I work for, the Denver Post? And I was a little cautious at first because journalists sometimes can get the story a little wrong, and I wanted to make sure that Mike was presented in a good light. So I got to know Kevin very carefully, asked Mike's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Price, if I could share the story because I wanted to honor their wishes as well. And eventually I started telling Kevin the whole story, and it grew into a big series of articles in the Denver Post. 5 days, 8 pages a day, I think it was. So literally 40 pages in the paper. So that's how Kevin first shared the story in 2008. And Kevin and I worked well together. And I said, I've been trying to write this book. Maybe we should write it together because you're deep into the story now. So that's what happened. I worked with Kevin and we became co-authors, and I wrote half and he wrote half, and we bounced it back and forth for a year or two. And eventually we got a good agent and we got a good publisher with Random House, now called Penguin Random House. And the book came out in 2011. So that's how I met my co-author and the book came to be. And it's been out now for, I guess, 9 years. And it kind of keeps on rolling. It came out in Italian. And in Italian, the version was called, I don't read Italian, but it was El Cerchio Blanco, which they said means the white circle, which was the looking up at the bottom of the hole that I had to climb out of. I was kind of worried it was talking about my big round white belly, so I'm a little uncertain about that one. But so we got it out in Italian, then it came out in paperback, won some awards at the National Outdoor Book Awards, and recognized by Amazon and New York Times. So that book is still out there now. So.
That's great. I don't really have, does anybody have, I'm getting another question. Never mind. So how do you train a resilient mind in the midst of something like the pandemic where there's no clear end defined, especially when things like anxiety and depression can play a role for so many?
Yeah, the pandemic has come in and it has changed everything that we've done and that we're doing. And that just eats away at us all. Maybe Everybody's up and down at different times. Maybe you found the first month easy and someone else found the first month hard, and everybody's adjusting at different rates. And as you've seen, it's affected everything. So really what it is, we're going to have to try and keep the faith that we're going to have to endure in this difficult period we're in with the pandemic, and here in Colorado, those fires again. So we have to endure for now. And in order to do that, we're going to have to take turns leading the way when we feel good. So maybe I'm having a good day and my climbing partner Rodney's having a bad day. I need to step up front and do a little bit more to help him out, because I know sometime soon I'm going to have a bad day. And he's going to have to step forward and lead the way a little bit, to help me with my life. And the same thing happens in climbing. We call it swinging leads. One partner goes first, then the other partner, then the other partner. So we do that swinging leads in climbing. Same thing with you and your support network, your friends, your family, your significant other. So for now, we've got to endure, try and hang on to the little good things we can, like book festivals like this. It's not the same as it was, but we're sharing ideas and learning a lot from all the other writers and poets we've seen this weekend, and keep our strength up and our hope up as much as we can, because someday this storm we're in, this pandemic, will taper off and end. I don't know whether that's 2 months or 7 months, I don't know, but it will end. And so we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to be like and what position do we want to be in when this thing ends? So try and do what you can and stay in shape and stay engaged, and know when it does go away, we will be a little bit beat up for sure. We're feeling it already. But if we can look at that and grab some lessons, we can be better prepared for the next challenge in life, whatever that is, another pandemic, something in your personal life, because there's going to be more challenges and difficulties ahead.
Absolutely, I agree. You're often described as a mountaineer, survivor, and author. How do you define or look at those labels? Which of those labels has been most important to you or most difficult for you to take on?
Yeah, like any labels that someone might put on you, or I put those on myself as well. Yeah, they all kind of fit. It doesn't explain the whole person, of course, but those are the core things that I do now: a mountaineer, author, speaker. I think the one that's had the most impact on my life is mountaineer, because I've been a mountaineer for 38 years. Those other things for 20 or 15 years, depending on which one you're talking about. And I was a climber long before I was a speaker and a writer. And after I stopped speaking and writing and get too old to even climb up a Horsetooth Mountain nearby, our 7,000 footer, I'll probably still be a mountaineer. I might be climbing very small hills nearby, very small hills, very slowly, but I'll still be a mountaineer in some form. So that's a lifelong part of who I am. So that's the one that probably means the most. The author and the speaker, those are important parts of what I do now, to share the stories and get the message out through venues like this, through my public speaking, through the last book, The Ledge. And I've actually I've written another book. I had a co-author in the last one. This one I wrote myself. I've got a new book coming out called The Next Everest, and that's coming out in April of next year. And I've really focused in on taking all the lessons I've learned from all of these climbs, including going to Mount Everest twice, and putting those into the Next Everest book, again, as part of my responsibility to share the lessons I've acquired.
What was the most challenging portion of writing your book?
Boy, it takes a long time to dig in and get it right, because it's not just telling what happened, it's trying to put forth what did it mean. So you have to bring your characters forward a little bit, a little writer talk here. You've got to develop a plot, you've got to develop the characters, even when that character is you. What are the important things that drive this person? And like the old, adage about writing, you have to show the reader, don't tell them. So you can't just, I'm a person who does this, this, and this. No. You need to show that through the action of your characters, even if the character is you and your friends and family. So it takes a long time to develop those skills. I mean, I took writing classes through Northern Colorado Writers and the Lighthouse down in Denver and many, many other places. I got a chance to go up to the Banff Writers Festival up in Canada, where the Banff Book and Film Festival comes from. So that all took a decade and a half to develop those skills. And then you can put it together, and then there's a lot of polish, because you want to try and make the story streamlined as best as you can. So there's a lot of steps for sure, and you have to also get comfortable with sharing this personal stuff. I mean, you have to admit to your own failures and your own dumb decisions that you made, because everybody makes them, and I definitely made them. That has to go in the book too. It has to be honest to show what drives this person, what mistakes they've made, and what do they feel bad about, because that's part of the character. You got to put that out there, and then let the readers decide what the lessons are and what value they can take from the book.
Yeah, I agree. And the emotional part of it, it would have been so difficult to write all of that. And we have the book at our library through an audiobook through Hoopla, and listening to you read it is fascinating. It's you, it's your voice. It makes it so much more personal. So I love that you read your book too.
Yeah, thanks. Funny backstory on that. So they asked me, they said, hey, Jim, you're a speaker. Would you record the book, The Ledge, that you and Kevin wrote? I thought, sure, this will be easy. I mean, read the book that I wrote. This will be easy, right? They put me in a little booth, and you can only read about 4 to 6 hours a day, and your voice starts to drop off. And so we could only record a certain amount every day. So I was in this little tiny booth, the size of a small bathroom or a phone booth, for 6 days, for long days. And it was so difficult. I spent 60 hours in those booths. And when I was all done, I didn't even want to hear it anymore. I was like, oh, I'm sick of reading that over and over again. So it's a lot harder work than I thought, but it does put it into my voice. And I think, like you say, I think maybe that comes through in the audio recording. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Tell us about the most important mental self-talk you use to get through during the most difficult moments on the ledge.
Yeah, there was ups and downs physically and mentally for sure. I mean, thoughts of went through my head about quitting. But the big driving force for me was that my partner Mike gave his life to save me. And no matter how hard and how scary and how difficult it seemed, he had done his job, so I should do my job. And that's part of that core value of where your resilience comes from. That's something that I talked about in The Ledge, and I talk about even more in The Next Everest, my next book, which is to look inside yourself and realize what drives you. I mean, deep, deep stuff about your family and your family of origin and what you owe your friends. And in The Next Everest, I talk about people like Rodney and my other partners and Mike that passed away. My partners enabled me to go really far. They propelled me really far in my climbing career. So whether it was climbing off of the ledge and out of that crevasse, or in The Next Everest trying to get up Mount Everest once during an earthquake and once going back another time, when I got tired and felt like quitting, I thought about how much people had done to help me to get this far. And I just didn't want to let them down by quitting, even though I was scared or tired. And there's a lot of strength in that if you look inside yourself and realize where your resilience comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you impart all the dangers of intense climbing to your student climbers, especially young students?
Yeah, that's part of the responsibility. You start getting some gray beard and gray hair like me and some of my other partners. It is a big responsibility because we want to encourage them to do this wonderful sport of climbing, and to be outside in nature and see the awe that exists in our mountains and our canyons. But it is dangerous. People get hurt. People get killed. And so we have to impart that knowledge kind of in layers, if you will. We kind of get them hooked on climbing first and then teach them how things can go wrong. And it's sort of a long mentorship. It can take years and years, maybe even a decade, for someone to get fully up to speed. And they should climb with different people to learn those people's pros and cons of what they do. But it is a real responsibility for older climbers to teach that to younger climbers. And we do it by pointing out better techniques. We do it by sharing stories, writing books, and they read the books, and then they'll feel comfortable and say, hey, I read in your book this thing happened. Why do you think that happened? Good question. So just basically passing that knowledge on to the next generation, because that's what's going to keep them safe. And even if they quit climbing, maybe they'll take something with them that will make them more resilient in their day-to-day life as well. So it's an important responsibility that older teachers, mentors, instructors have to step into.
Right. I like in your book how you said you're in this situation, all that's going through your mind is like the survival tips that you're thinking about from the books that you read or things that you knew about. That's amazing. I think that does influence other people if they know, if they have something that they can remember, they can go back to and think, I think I could do this. I think I'll be okay if I can do this. And there's so many survival shows out there right now too. So, and I know that the younger generation tend to like those. I have a question from Raul. Have you considered writing a book about your first experience in Mount Everest, Nepal during the earthquake? Please say this came from Raul on Facebook.
This question came from Raul on Facebook. Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, I kind of mentioned that earlier. So what Raul's talking about is I went to Everest in 2015 with the team. We were there when the biggest earthquake in 81 years slammed it in Nepal. It was 7.8 magnitude. It was totally tragic for Nepal and its neighboring countries. And my teammates and I were camped at Camp 1 on the Khumbu Glacier at 19,700 feet. So yes, Raul, I'm written that up. That's the book I mentioned, The Next Everest. It's coming out in April next year. And you can pre-order it through Old Firehouse Books or wherever else you get your books for sure. And I share the story of the earthquake, what I learned from it afterwards in 2016 when I was struggling with should I go back or not. And then I did go back in 2017 and was able to apply the lessons I learned from that traumatic experience of being there during the quake. So yes, that'll be out next April. So thanks for asking.
Great. There are a lot of folks struggling with their mental health right now. What are a few key things they can do to foster a resilient mindset?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, a lot of books. You'll find out a lot of articles. If you just Google resilience, you'll find a lot of articles coming up these days. Sometimes they use other words like overcoming adversity, persevering, tenacity, grit. Those are all part of resilience. I think resilience is a higher arching thing because there's the words about being tough, about grit and tenacity and not quitting. But I think resilience also includes, it can also come from patience, because patience is a form of perseverance. If you don't quit during the storm, if you don't quit that job, sooner or later things will bounce around and you'll still be here. And your resilience can also come from spiritual things, your religion, your faith, commitment to family. Those are sources of resilience as well. So during a tough time, I think you need to pull from all of those. Sometimes you have to admit when you're having a tough day and say, I just don't feel well today. Can you help me with this project, or just even take a little time off? One of the things I typed up is some tips, and I was going to be on the computer, but I had a little problem sharing. I've got a spot if you want to text in. You can text the word resilience to 55444. I'll repeat it. Type the word resilience into 55444, and you can sign up for my email. And I've just recently written up 9 tips about being resilient in the face of uncertainty. So there's a few tips in there about how to do that for yourself, and if you're a leader, how to step it up and help others be resilient through this time of uncertainty as well.
That would be really helpful. Thank you. Could you tell us a little more about your friend Mike?
Yeah, Mike was a character. He moved around with his parents some, but he had an Oklahoma accent, so he kind of a slow speaker, and I'm kind of an energetic guy, so we were kind of a comic pair. And we knew each other well. We went rock climbing and backcountry skiing and ice climbing here in Colorado, and then went to Mount Rainier. And he would always tease me a little bit. If I was like, oh, this thing happened at work, he would just kind of pick away at it like your friends do. He could keep picking at the wound just to tease me a little bit until I realized he was really needling me, and I would let go of whatever was making me crazy. And then we'd have a good time on the climb. Mike worked for Outward Bound, so his job was to teach these skills to others, particularly to young people. So I learned a lot from him, even though I'd been a climber 10 years when we went to Mount Rainier. Mike had been a climber for 14. So I learned a bit from him, and he was a very skilled mentor. He was really good at passing on the technical skills and the people skills about being in the backcountry. So I learned a lot from him about being a good climber. And even though he's been gone a long time, I think about him all the time. And when I was scared on Everest and then trying to decide whether to go back after the earthquake, I thought a lot about what would Mike want me to do. And I realized, man, I was in a position to go back. He would probably encourage me to do my best and go back. And that was a key part of why I went back to Everest the second time in 2017.
Yeah, I read that Mike's father gave you his Outward Bound pin.
Yeah.
That must be just so meaningful for you.
Oh, highly meaningful. Yeah. Describe that in the ledge a little bit. His dad gave me one of Mike's Outward Bound pins, and I carry it around. It's one of my sacred amulets, if you will. I've taken it on many climbs. I've taken it to Everest both times. It went to the summit with me and back on Mount Everest in 2017. So I carry that with me all the time on the important climbs because it's a little piece of Mike for sure. And his parents were very kind to me after the accident on Mount Rainier many years ago in 1992. And so it's sort of a passing from them to me as well. So I take that with me on all my big climbs.
Yeah. Did you say that he had never climbed Nepal?
Mike never got to Nepal. He and I talked about it, about maybe going there and at least going trekking, which is backpacking, maybe climb something moderate. We kind of dreamed about Everest, but it was kind of out of our league at the time when we were both still young climbers. So when I went back to Nepal with my wife the first time in 1992, as I described in the ledge, we basically went there just to go trekking and to have a ceremony, what they call a puja in the local language, at the base of Mount Everest on behalf of Mike, to kind of be a spiritual healing thing on behalf of Mike. So we did that in 1992, and I have smaller versions of that each time I go back to Nepal, and always think about Mike because we've been talking about it way back as early as 1989 together.
That's amazing. I have a question from Robert on Facebook. Do you have any future climbs on the docket post-COVID? If so, how do you choose where and what your next climb may be?
Thanks for asking. I try and do an expedition about every other year because I've got a family, I've got a wife and 2 kids, I've got a job like everybody else. So to balance the family and the family needs and the job versus the climbing, I find that about every other year is what works for me. So I try to go on an expedition every other year. The last one was in 2019. Ronnie and I and a couple other guys went down to Peru. So it's kind of coming back around again for 2021. Don't have anything picked out yet. Depending on COVID, of course, for all of us, I probably will stay here in the States and maybe do something like some crazy backcountry thing in Colorado or Wyoming. If we can travel a little further, might like to get up to Alaska again. Been up there twice. Love to go back up there because it's as great as any expedition place you can find around the planet right here in our own country, up in Alaska. So I put Alaska pretty high on the list. As things open up more, yeah, there's other places might want to go back to South America, maybe Antarctica. We'll see.
That sounds great. I have one final question. What are you reading or listening to right now?
Thanks. I am reading The Labyrinth of Ice by Buddy Levy. It's a story about one of the polar expeditions around 1878 or so. They went up north and they planned on spending a few months and maybe one winter, and they wound up spending 2.5 years. And it was a brutal expedition. Very well-written book, and it kind of pulls a great narrative together out of all these historical journals. So Labyrinth of Ice is what I'm reading right now.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank Jim for speaking today. If you would like to purchase Jim's books, just go to oldfirehousebooks.com/bookfest2020. Book plates are available from the select authors. Please indicate in the comment section if you want to order. Sorry, I can't get this right. Section of your order if you are interested in a signed copy. I want to also give a big thanks to all of our authors, volunteers, presenters, sponsors, and the library for making the last 5 years possible. We have one more session at 7 p.m., so I hope you can join us. Finally, please go to focobookfest.org and fill out the survey. We rely on you in planning our future book festivals. Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.